The wind screamed across the empty prairie, tearing at the ragged cloak of a woman who had been walking since nightfall. Clara's boots sank into the sucking mud, each step heavier than the last, as though the earth itself wanted to drag her down. Her breath came in shallow bursts, raw from the cold, and her eyes darted over her shoulder at every gust that sounded like a rider's gallop. The night was merciless. No lantern, no fire, no shelter. Only the taste of rain and the metallic edge of fear clinging to her tongue. She pressed forward, stubborn against her own exhaustion. To stop was to surrender, and surrender meant chains, or worse. A memory flickered. Her father's body lowered into the ground while men in the town whispered about her inheritance, their smiles sharp as knives. One of them had reached for her hand that same night, promising protection in exchange for ownership. She had spat in his face, then run before they could lock her inside the life they had chosen. Now, the horizon stretched endless and dark, her only company the hollow ache of betrayal. Dawn scraped across the sky in dull streaks of grey. Clara stumbled against a wooden fence post, splinters biting her palms. The lowing of cattle drifted across the fields, and for the first time in days she saw proof of human settlement. She lifted her head, blinking against the blur of fatigue, and a figure on horseback emerged from the mist. He rode with the kind of steadiness that comes from long years in the saddle, broad shoulders, hat pulled low, a rifle slung across his back. Her heart jolted. Friend or foe, she could not yet tell. The rider slowed as he approached, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. His horse snorted, hooves thudding softly against the wet ground. Clara tried to straighten, but her knees buckled. She would have fallen if not for the strong arm that caught her. "You're burning up," he said, voice low, rough from disuse. His gaze scanned the horizon before returning to her face. "You alone out here?" She wanted to lie, to push him away, but the truth spilled out in a whisper. "No place left. No one." He grunted, lifted her as though she weighed nothing, and swung her onto his horse. She struggled weakly. "Leave me. I'll bring you trouble." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Lady, I don't ride past trouble." With that, he nudged the horse forward, and the world blurred into the rhythm of hooves. The ranch appeared suddenly from the folds of the land, a lonely cabin of weathered wood standing against the prairie winds. A windmill creaked nearby, its slow turning like the groan of an old sentinel. Corrals stretched beyond, holding restless horses and cattle that snorted at the scent of strangers. He swung down, then lifted Clara into his arms again, carrying her inside without ceremony. The cabin smelled of smoke, leather, and dust. A fire snapped in the hearth, throwing shadows across walls scarred by old repairs. He set her in a chair and poured water from a jug. She watched him warily, every muscle taut. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice brittle. His eyes flicked toward her, dark and unreadable. "Cooking would be nice. My stews killed braver men than me." Despite herself, she almost laughed. The sound came out strangled, half a sob. He didn't press her, only handed over the cup. She drank, the water cool against her parched throat, and felt some of the weight in her chest ease. Hours passed. She dozed by the fire, waking to the faint clatter of tools outside. Through the window she saw him mending a fence, movements efficient, solitary. A man used to silence. But the silence unsettled her, it left too much room for memories. Her father's face, drawn with illness. The greedy eyes of men who measured her not by heart but by land and cattle. The sound of pursuit on the road behind her. The creak of saddles broke her reverie. She froze, peering through a crack in the shutter. For riders passed along the road, scanning the fields with sharp intent. Her breath caught. One of them leaned in the saddle, studying the cabin with suspicion. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. A hand touched her shoulder, steadying. Daniel, she had learned his name when he left a letter on the table, signed simply D. Hayes. His expression was calm, though his eyes held the weight of knowing. He said nothing, only pulled the shutter closed and guided her away from the window. She whispered, frantic, "They're looking for me. You don't understand, they'll—" "I understand enough," he interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "Let them ride. You're safe here." The words were simple, yet she felt them sink deeper than she expected, like roots pushing into dry soil. Safe. It had been a long time since she believed in that word. Night fell again, the fire burning low. Clara sat across from him, the flickering light casting shadows across his face. He poured 2 cups of strong coffee, slid one across the table. She hesitated, then wrapped her hands around the warmth. For the first time since leaving town, She allowed herself to breathe without fear of the next moment. He broke the silence first. You running from something, or someone? She studied the dark liquid in her cup. From both. From men who wanted to cage me. From the memory of trusting people I shouldn't have. Her voice cracked. I lost my father. Then I lost everything else. His gaze dropped to the fire. I lost my wife here. Cabin burned once. Took her with it. Been patchin' holes ever since. The room thickened with unspoken grief. 2 lives, battered in different ways, suddenly parallel. Clara blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, spilling hot down her cheeks. She pressed her palms against her eyes, whispering through the tremors, I've nowhere left to go. Silence stretched. The fire hissed as a log collapsed into embers. She lowered her hands, and found him watching her with something softer than pity, steadier than sympathy. His jaw tightened, as though the words he spoke cost him something. Then stay with me. The air between them shifted, fragile and electric. She wanted to ask why, to demand his reasons, but her throat closed around the words. For a heartbeat, hope felt dangerous. And then, outside, a glow flickered against the window. Torchlight. Voices carried on the wind, closer than before. Clara's breath seized, her pulse racing. Daniel rose without a sound, shoulders rigid, gaze fixed on the door. The men had found the ranch. The light outside wavered like fire dancing on water, torch flames bobbing in the darkness as the riders drew near. Daniel moved to the window, his rifle already in his hands, his body a solid wall of resolve. Clara pressed her back to the cold cabin wall, her heartbeat thundering so loud she thought they would hear it through the boards. The men called out to one another, their laughter coarse and mean, the kind of sound that promised ruin. Daniel spoke quietly, without turning. Stay down. Don't make a sound. She wanted to protest, wanted to beg him not to risk his life for her, but the set of his shoulders stopped her. This man had carried his own grief for years, and now he stood ready to shoulder hers too. She lowered herself to the floor, trembling, her fingers digging into the rough wood as if holding it could keep her from shattering. The door shuddered with a sudden pounding. Hayes! A voice barked, thick with drink and arrogance. We know she's in there. Hand her over, and we'll leave you be. Daniel didn't answer. He cocked the rifle, the click sharp in the tense air. Outside, a man cursed, and then came the rush of boots against wood. A shot rang out, splintering the doorframe. Daniel returned fire, swift and sure, the boom echoing through the cabin. Clara pressed her fists to her ears, tears streaming down her face as chaos roared on the other side of the walls. The fight was brutal, each exchange of gunfire shaking the fragile silence of the night. Dust rained from the rafters, the acrid smell of powder filling the cabin. Daniel moved with precision, but he grunted when a bullet tore across his arm, sending blood down his sleeve. Clara lurched forward, but his voice snapped sharp as the crack of his rifle. Stay back. At last, the retreating thunder of hooves signaled the men had fled, at least for now. Silence draped heavy across the room, broken only by Daniel's rough breathing. He sagged against the wall, the rifle slipping from his grasp, his hand clamping down over the wound. Clara rushed to him, her fear burning into determination. Let me see. She tore cloth from her skirt, pressing it against the wound despite his protest. He hissed through his teeth but didn't push her away. She worked with frantic care, cleaning, binding, tying the strip tight with trembling fingers. His eyes followed her, steady even in pain. You've done this before, he muttered. My father taught me. Said I'd need to know. Her voice faltered. I never thought I'd be saving someone else with it. He let out a low laugh, rough but real. Patch me right, or I'll haunt you. The absurdity of it tugged a smile from her despite the blood on her hands. For the first time in days, fear loosened its grip on her chest. She met his eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding, fragile yet undeniable. Hours dragged as the fire dimmed. Daniel dozed against the chair, his skin pale but breathing steady. Clara sat close, watching, guarding. In the quiet, she let the truth spill out, words carried on the hush of flames. I used to dream of leaving town with someone who loved me. We'd ride west, build something of our own. But dreams don't survive men like them. They take and take until there's nothing left. Her throat tightened. I thought I'd lost myself. Daniel's eyes opened, heavy-lidded but clear. You're still here. That's something. You think I can just start again? He shifted, wincing, but his gaze held firm. I buried my heart when she died. Thought I was finished. Then you showed up on my land, half dead but still fighting. Reminded me I was still alive too. His hand brushed hers, calloused fingers rough against her skin. Clara leaned closer, her breath trembling, their faces a whisper apart. The world shrank to firelight, to the press of his gaze, to the sudden, terrifying possibility of hope. But before lips could meet, the distant snap of a branch jolted them both. She pulled back, the moment shattered. The riders had not given up. This time, their voices carried threats darker than before. We'll burn you out, Hayes. Burn you both to ash. Clara's blood ran cold. Daniel reached for his rifle with his good arm, but she stopped him, rising to her feet. No, she whispered, strength threading her voice. Not this time. Before he could protest, she pushed open the door and stepped into the night. The flames of torches painted her face in fierce light. The men sneered, their confidence thick as smoke. But she stood tall, no longer trembling. This land isn't yours, she called, her voice sharp enough to cut through the night. Neither am I. I'm done running. The men laughed, but it faltered when Daniel appeared behind her, rifle steady despite his wound. His presence was quiet steel, his silence more dangerous than any threat. The two of them, side by side, were a wall the riders could not breach. The standoff stretched. Finally, curses muttered, torches hurled to the dirt, the men wheeled their horses and rode into the dark. Their defeat left only smoke and silence. Clara swayed, breath rushing out as though the ground had been holding it captive. Daniel lowered his rifle and touched her shoulder, steadying her. You just told them this place is your home. She looked at him, her lips trembling into something like a smile. Maybe it is. Morning crept slow and golden, spilling across the plains. The cabin, battered but unbroken, stood against the horizon like a survivor. Clara sat on the porch beside Daniel, exhaustion etched into her bones yet tempered by something stronger. She watched the sun climb, painting the land in fire and promise. I thought I was running from everything, she murmured. But maybe I was running to you. Daniel turned his head, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. Stay with me, Clara. Build a life here. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just ours. The simplicity of it struck deeper than any grand vow. She reached for his hand, fingers threading through his. For once, the silence between them wasn't heavy with grief but alive with possibility. And though the Wild West still stretched wide and uncertain before them, Clara knew she had found what she thought was lost forever, a place to belong, a heart to trust. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.